Welcome to the Intimate Marriage Podcast. I'm your host, Alexandra Stockwell. I'm a physician and an intimate marriage expert, and I specialize in showing couples how to have incredible, passionate relationships. I've been married for 25 years. My husband and I have 4 children and full professional lives, and we've created an amazing relationship. If you want to deepen your understanding of your own relationship and learn to access new heights of emotional, sensual, and erotic intimacy, you're in the right place. I will show you how now. Let's dive in. And we're going to dive into scheduling sex. How do you feel about that? Is it something you've ever done? I mean, so many people either consciously or unconsciously have the idea that when you're really attracted to one another, then sex is spontaneous. You just can't keep your hands off of one another. That's what we see in the movies. Oh, we think of Olivia and the president in Scandal. I mean, actually, I can't even remember if that's her name. Kerry Washington. Anyway, I mean, think of any movie or book or TV show where the lead characters just have the most amazing chemistry. And the way we know that they are really sexually attracted to one another is they can't help but have sex. It's like the best of our animal nature takes off and gives us the most gratifying experiences. And if we're going to plan sex, well, that feels like it's a little pathetic. And it's basically like anything else on our to-do list. And passion is not supposed to be on our to-do list. On our to-do list are the mundane things like going grocery shopping, making sure the oil is changed regularly, looking into which realtor we're going to use to buy a new home. Like, these are the kinds of things that go on a to-do list, not lovemaking and connecting with our beloved in such intimate, gratifying ways. Because if we plan it, then it's not erotically motivated. That's how that narrative goes. And I'm really sympathetic to that narrative. If you've dealt with infertility or you've heard about it from any of your friends, you know that that can really take a toll. It can be really draining. It can transition sex into something that is more mechanical and focused as a means to an end. And I don't know of anyone who's really had a lot of scheduled sex in the infertility context who feels excited about having sex be scheduled. Or maybe you've been to a sex therapist and you went because sex is infrequent and or not that great. And so your sex therapist has advised you to schedule it, and it's part of a remedial program to get sex back on track to where it will again be passionate, spontaneous, and definitely not scheduled because you won't need it. Okay, I really get that approach. I'm sympathetic if it's yours. And I really hope that by the end of this episode, you have a totally different view of scheduling sex. And let's be clear, if you're living a life of leisure, well, maybe you don't need to schedule sex in quite the same way that I'm talking about. But if you have responsibilities, work, family, household responsibilities, these are intense times, and time can feel tight, and certainly time for making love and being erotically activated. Well, the answer is to schedule sex, but to do it with the right attitude. As my friend Dr. Kelly Casperson says, exercise is not something someone would choose to do spontaneously, at least typically. We need to schedule it to make it happen. So why not give ourselves the grace and do that with sex? Yes, that's true and that's practical, but I want this to go so much further, and I'm sure Kelly would agree. If you have an opportunity to have a magnificent meal at a 5-star Michelin restaurant, do you resent picking a time for your meal and making a reservation sometimes months in advance? No, it just helps you anticipate it. And there's pleasure in knowing that on Saturday at 8, you're going to be dressed beautifully and so happy to be walking in the doors and received by the hostess and taken to your table. Or if you're going to a play, something to nourish your soul, you don't resent that it's at a particular time. And there really is something so important that Kelly's pointing to when she's talking about exercise, because the things that we value, we make sure that there's room for them. If you value putting your children to bed, you make room in your schedule to do it. If you value eating regularly, you make time to do it, or you're going to figure it out, or maybe that's just not that important to you. So I really want to invite you to think of sex as the sensual experience that it is. You can be fed through touch, through taste, through sound, through smell. You don't have to partake in all of those, but you certainly can. And in this way, it really is like a gourmet meal. And sure, it's fun to randomly open the refrigerator and pull out a bunch of ingredients and make something magnificent. But I wouldn't say it's better or more delicious than when you take some time to plan your menu and make sure the ingredients are there and anticipate how the kitchen's going to smell before you set the table so beautifully. There is definitely an equivalency in the kind of erotic experiences that you can have with the person you live with. Let me tell you about Janine and Eric. I coached them, let's see, I think it was last summer because it was a few months into the pandemic. And actually, in their case, they both were really busy working long hours and hadn't found their way to spontaneous sex anywhere near as much as they wanted, especially him, but both of them. And then the pandemic came and they were at home. And I think they thought that that would open up the flirtatious, intimate energy because they'd be together, something that they'd been missing for a while. But that's not actually how it worked because, well, I don't need to explain this. Being at home during the pandemic, unanticipated homeschooling, all of the stress, figuring out Zoom, like the fact that Janine and Eric were together really didn't solve the issue as they thought it would. So when I coached them, there were a number of things that we focused on, mostly how to connect with one another, how to each have their own experience despite being under the same roof, and be open and present and honoring of the other ones. So really our focus was on communication, vulnerability, seeing and being seen, hearing and being heard. But also there was the question of sex, because yes, they were spending more time near one another, but they actually were having less sex than they had before. So I suggested that they schedule it. And at first, they were pretty put off. But I talked to them the way I've just talked to you about reservations at a gourmet restaurant and how fun it is to look forward to it and think in advance what you're going to order. Do you want lamb? Are you going to have the vegetable curry? Is this the night for filet mignon? Or you don't have to think about it at all until you get there. That is both ways work when anticipating sexual experiences, of course. But anyway, they trusted me and they were willing to try it. And because I talked about it as being like a reservation at a fabulous restaurant, they could get into it and be a little bit flirtatious about it. In fact, Eric loved anticipating it. And so even if they weren't interacting about it and Janine wasn't thinking about it at all, he definitely appreciated being able to anticipate it. And the real key when it comes to scheduled sex is both anticipating it the way you would anticipate a beautiful meal that you've made reservations for, but also knowing what you need to really enjoy yourself. And it depends what you need, how that's going to work. So in Janine's case, when they had a plan to have sex at 9:00 on a Thursday night, she made a point of asking Eric to put the kids to bed that night because she wanted to take a bath ahead of time and be really relaxed and let go of the day so that she would be oh so ready at 9:00. And so if you schedule sex and you have an opportunity to get ready the way you would get ready for a date, then that's really beautiful. I have to say that when my husband and I schedule sex, it's not always a context in which I'm going to be taking a bath ahead of time and getting ready. In fact, we sometimes schedule it for 5:30 in the morning because it is such a fun way to start the day. Anyway, I have learned over the years what needs to happen inside me so that I'm ready. And Janine needed to do that. That's why she started taking a bath. And every other couple that I have coached and advised about scheduling sex as a way to navigate wanting more intimacy and feeling like there's no time for it. What scheduling sex does is it ultimately shows you how you are in control of your libido, your turn on, and your desire. And by being in control, I don't mean that you're controlling. What I mean is that sex can be on your to-do list. It can be in your Google Calendar. But when the time comes, it's up to you not to treat it as something on your to-do list in the sense that you're just doing it to check the box. You need to practice letting go of what's on your mind and all the things that distract you. You need to practice breathing more deeply, slowing down, paying attention to what is arising in you. Do you want to be touched so lightly as the two of you reacquaint yourselves with one another's bodies? Or do you want to take turns massaging one another a little bit more vigorously? I just mean like not a light touch, but really massaging the muscles. Or maybe you put on certain music, or you have a really silky robe that you put on. Or maybe you put on lipstick. Or maybe you don't need any of those things. But one of the like false Disney myths in our culture, at least for women, is that great sex comes when we are swept off our feet, when our lover is an outstanding lover and just knows how to play us as though we are a musical instrument. Well, even if you've experienced that at some point with your long-term partner, that is not a sustainable way of having great sex. The sustainable way of having great sex is for you to take responsibility and get to know your own body and your own sexuality and your own desire and convey that to your partner energetically, flirtatiously, inferentially, and also sometimes very directly and explicitly. And let me make sure to add that when you do communicate explicitly, it's with no blame, no judgment, and no expectation that he or she should have known it already. One of my favorite phrases from one of my teachers, Nicole Daedone, is each time like it's the first time. When it comes to scheduling sex and then having great sex, all communications aim to make it each time like it's the first time. And what I mean by that is if you've told your partner you need to be kissed more slowly in order to warm up, and you've said it 12 times, and oh my God, he's kissing me so hard. Doesn't he know I want it lighter? Each time, like it's the first time, go ahead and say again, please kiss me lighter so I can warm up a little bit. One of the things that scheduling sex does is it evokes intentionality. And all of our areas of life benefit from vibrancy, aliveness, creativity, passion, and definitely intentionality. So try it. In fact, this is a really good episode to have your partner listen to as well. So he or she knows where you're coming from and immediately understands that your desire to schedule sex does not mean there's a problem. This is not fixing a problem. It can be used to fix a problem, but it also can be used to express your priorities. If one of your values is a rich, erotic life with your partner, well, does your calendar reflect that value? Does how you spend your time reflect that value? Let the answer be yes. And I want to tell you, I have this fabulous program. It's called Intimacy. It's 8 relatively short audios. It's just like, in a way, a super short podcast series. And in Intimacy, I define intimacy and I name the 3 biggest blocks to emotional intimacy and how to resolve them, the 3 biggest blocks to sensual intimacy and how to resolve them, and the 3 biggest blocks to erotic intimacy and how to resolve them. So I'm going to have the link to Intimacy in the show notes. I just think that program is an ideal companion to this episode. And if you want more juicy, dynamic, fantastic intimacy in a regular way that you can count on, go ahead and make sure that your partner listens to this episode as well. And both of you dive in and listen to Intimacy. It's really going to rock your world, open your minds, and let your bodies come closer together.
Thank you for listening to the Intimate Marriage Podcast. For more information about Alexandra, her book, and her coaching services, go to theintimatemarriagepodcast.com.